national security infrastructure. A security infrastructure is basically based on apartheid. It is based on oppression.
Yeah, people. So, from a creative and an academic space, how do we meet and discuss ideas around climate security? So growing up in Zimbabwe, you have a very colonial system that's in place.
A you.
You
Iwe.
What's happening, people? And welcome back to another Underrated Individuals podcast segment. We starting up this whole new concept called Underrated Ideas, thanks to drumroll Dr. Duraid Jalili. So this is a good friend of mine, and he is heavily focused on and ingrained in climate security. And we've had a number of conversations where we've realized that the two perspectives that we have, it would be great to put them in a space where they can be explored and not our perspectives alone, but other people. So from a creative and an academic space, how do we meet and discuss ideas around climate security? So that being said, underrated ideas. Um, Dr. Duraid Jalili, over to you.
I don't know what.
He's like, why are you
Feels
calling
weird
me
when you call me
doctor?
that. Yeah. Also feels weird not to be like facing you and talking, kind of like
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
this
okay,
thing over
no,
there.
okay. So let's like
And I do like
yeah,
side.
yeah, no, let's start by engaging with them and
Yes,
let's
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. Also, I apologize to everyone. I didn't know when you do these videos how many lights were like here in the background. I always thought when you see it on like when you see it on like Instagram or something like that, everyone looks so
It's just filters. Hey.
like it's oh, is that it?
No, a lot of the time, I think no, a lot of people have what they call like just these lights.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And I now can see how extraordinarily white I am. So yeah, these lights are really I need to put some fake tan on or something. Yeah, I think I think we've been trying to like, or at least I've been trying to figure figure out a way of like working with you
mm,
on something that could be a joint project because of the way that I think our conversations just naturally end up in this place whereby like we always see the crossovers and
yeah,
we always see the like the similarities in what we're trying to do just from very different places and perspectives. And the underrated ideas concept for me was like, yeah, I mean, underrated individuals as a concept in itself is amazing. Underrated ideas, kind of like stemming from that, I think gives us the ability to also turn around and say, well, actually, there's a lot of people out there who are underrated individuals who are not being heard.
mm,
But there's a lot of people out there who, you know, traditionally you would look at someone who's like in like a big organization, who's in a, you know, who's in academia and
mhm,
they've got leverage and they've got a voice and they've got a platform that gives them a kind of credibility that someone who might be an underrated individual doesn't have.
yeah.
But they might still be trying to get ideas out there that people are like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Come on, you know, like who you kidding? And I think that for me, what it is, so I mean, I work in kind of policy spaces a lot. I work in a lot of places where people are looking to think about what the future looks like.
Yeah.
What are the security risks we're going to be facing, particularly in relation to how environmental changes are going to shape kind of everything around us. And those discussions and those kind of forecasts are always so conservative and so like basic. Not always, not
But a
always,
lot of the
but a
time,
lot of the
yeah.
time. And we call in the kind of academic world, we call it like alternative imaginaries, like alternative social imaginaries or like socio-technological imaginaries. It's like
Mhm.
an unnecessarily complicated term for
So,
like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Someone's got a different idea. But
Oh, you
But
mean they think different?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, that they have an
yeah, yeah.
alternative view.
Um, so yeah, or they can just think of things that you can't think of,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that and we need more of that in the policy space, in the kind of like practitioner space. We just need more of that. And I think for me, if I can help bring some of those perspectives into that space, that's amazing. That's
that's
like
a
the best
win.
thing I can do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like the crossover on my side, like the creative side, is one. Yes, it's always been about creating opportunities for creatives to not only get their work recognized, but for their work to have impact.
Mm,
So sometimes, as you say, this crossover might be that they speak to an academic and they get to tell their story, but the academic helps them like word it for a certain demographic of people or a certain group of people, and therefore it gets more um it gets into different places.
yeah. We clothe it in our like falsely complicated language. Yeah.
And but then it kind of opens up those doors for communication. But more so is when and that's what I found is the more conversations we had, you've been able to meet me, but I've also been able to prompt and ask questions where I'm confused. And you've helped me question myself also with my ideas. And okay, so how did you get there? Explain it again. And it makes me communicate better. And that's what I'm saying is as a creative, sometimes you're so stuck in your idea as well that and your way of saying things that you forget that you're meant to be communicating with people, and it's very easy for a lot of creatives to go off and lock themselves in a room and write an album or whatever it is and be like, it's amazing
Mm.
because I spent so much time on it. But when you start to open these communication lines, you start to see that it doesn't necessarily change the outcome of what you're trying to do. It just helps you perfect the way you're going to put it out. It helps you see other opportunities as well because of the type of conversations you're having. It also opens up your mind, to the purpose or the bigger purpose you serve. One of the people that comes to mind in this conversation that I would love to get on this underrated ideas is Jessica Bwali.
Mm.
Now, Jessica Bwali started off in radio as a journalist, and she ended up doing stuff and being like going to spaces and they started to talk more and more about climate. And then she was like, oh, well, let me look into climate. It's like before she was covering entertainment and she was like, let me look. And she'd
Yeah.
fallen so in.
Shit.
Oh, someone needs to say
Yeah.
something. I need to say something now. But Jess is like she's been doing so many amazing things in the Zambian space, and it's not because she's got academics behind her telling her what to do. It's because she's engaged with academia or academics in a
Mm.
way where they've enlightened her or helped her, see things from a different perspective and see some of the problems. And then she's now gone into that space with new eyes. And that's what it is. Is those conversations kind of, I think, change the lens in which you view the world.
So I mean, I think this speaks to another like component of why I've like if we had met on Twitter, we would not be friends. Like I'd have said something unnecessarily like snide. You'd have said something in language that I was like, ah, this guy's like a conspiracy theorist or something like that. And we wouldn't have not a conspiracy if it's true. And we wouldn't have like had the space and physical kind of like, you know, there's a trust that can come from being physically present with someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
We wouldn't have had that ability. And I mean, I think it has been like revealing to me things that are kind of obvious, but basically like often what we find is people getting shut down for using, we all know that like language is a source of inequity and it's a
Mhm.
source of
Mhm.
control.
Mhm.
And that used to be something that was more accepted.
mm,
as a concept in a way. Like if you come from like a working class background, if you come from like a language that is not the same as the place you're in, then it's like you don't have power.
mm,
And what's happened in contemporary like media is that rather than people turning around and saying, yeah, you don't let's work together to see if we're actually talking about the same thing,
mm.
we're shutting people down because of
Yeah,
the initial language they use. And
yeah.
there's so many conversations we've had where you've said something and I've been like, what are you talking about? Like, mate, what's going on? Like what crazy thing is this?
Yeah,
And we get further and further along, and I'm like, oh, you're talking about fifth wave feminism kind of
yeah,
thing, or like, yeah, that's actually, and that's a really hot topic right now. Or like, you're talking about like the importance of like oral history for like, sense of self and stuff like that. And if I hadn't engaged with that conversation, and similarly, which you are welcome to talk about, if you'd have come across me and some of the stuff that I said, you'd be like, who is this? This like expert, quotation marks, this expert who I forget who this filmed.
No, no, no,
Um,
no, no. It's
who is
good.
this expert like who thinks that they can, you know, decide for everyone, who thinks that their opinion carries more weight, and they're using this technical language that is designed to like keep other people from away
Away
from
from
having
having
power in
power.
this
Yeah.
conversation, which you would have been right about. But I think like, and I'm gonna sort of say like, to I think you come from a place where academia means something a lot different to the place that I come from. But I want you
Mm.
to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, so growing up in Zimbabwe, you have a very colonial system that's in place. And even to this day, Zimbabwe, Zambia is very similar in that tone where you're told to rep like basically read the textbook and replicate or copy and paste. If it's in the textbook, it's fact.
Mm,
And therefore it should be put down as fact in the exam room.
yeah,
And if you can do that, if you can, regurgitate this stuff, you will then get a good mark and you'll be able to go to university and then just repeat that process, find stuff that is in a textbook that has got that accreditation of some sort
mm,
and regurgitate that and you're fine. That was my concept of academia.
yeah,
And that's the concept that I come from. And the more conversations we had, I started to realize that my way of thinking, which God forbid, is very academic. It's I
yeah,
question a lot. I don't, and it's I got kicked out of multiple classes. And when I say this, people may go, "Oh yeah, he was a bad child." And it's like, no, I questioned a lot. Like I sat there in physics lessons, and you've seen me do it with multiple physicists who are lecturers, and question the ideologies which they so rightfully think are factual and right, and there's
mm,
nothing else but what is in the textbook that they studied. And it's like, oh well, it's because I ran this test. But okay, if you run this
yeah.
test, this doesn't exist. So does it mean that it is not there? Because when you ran the other test, it's that
If everything is correct in the textbook, then why are we using a different textbook than
textbook
we were like 20 years
years
ago? Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many conversations I think we had, and the whole point I think of this segment, yes, we're going to try and start with climate security to get that idea of what it means, to
To different
different
people.
people,
Yeah.
because you have probably a way better overall. He has to be an expert. If he doesn't if he doesn't understand this, then yeah, guys, call him up on it in the comments. But yeah, like versus when I remember with the first conversation we had, and I'll see if I can find the clip where you'd asked me about what environmental security means to me,
Mm,
and the assumption was
yeah,
the
that was
farm.
the
Yeah, you're like, oh, the farm, and I was like, nah, the farm is life, like that's
mm,
living. I never ever the term environmental security had never ever creeped into a conversation or been ever mentioned when I was growing up in Africa. Instead, I get to the and bear in mind, it's not that the way we were living was anti-environment. It's everything that we were doing was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, what was
It's
around the
your lived
concept.
reality. You're
Yes,
not thinking
was
about it as a
a
thing.
thing. So
Yeah.
that was the conversation we had, and I was like, wow. So environmental security for somebody who is probably growing up now in the UK, right? They would feel like they're empowered going into a space where people don't have the language to be
Mm,
able to converse with them, and you'd think that they don't understand the concept, but you're just speaking around their life. And if you had the conversation with him, you'd realize, like, oh, they live in a mud house that has absolutely no cement. It's got wood, grass, and clay. That's biodegradable building.
yeah.
That is so far advanced compared to where we are now, because we all talking about and sustainability. And it's like, yeah, that's great because that thing
Yeah,
just
but if you do it the way you do it here, then you get to pay more. You get to pay more for the same thing. It's better. You know.
so I think like that's the whole point is to start to unpack a lot of these type of conversations and bring them forward.
Mm.
Some of the episodes will include different individuals. As I said, I'm hoping to get Jess, on this segment, part of the podcast. We've got a few experts as well.
I've got
So
so many people I want to bring on.
that's going to lead to a little bit more as well about the network. Please tell us a bit more about, the security, climate security.
I mean, but the name will probably have changed by the time this goes. So we've been trying to create a network basically for people who are involved in climate security work. And I mean, climate security as a term, I think it's a bit, I think it's a bit narrow because it makes us think that like climate change is the only issue we face. But
Mhm,
like the environmental issues we face are like multiple
mhm.
and vast,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
From, climate change is not like the major reason or the most like critical reason, at least now, maybe in future it will be, for things like the kind of biodiversity loss we're seeing. That's like human extraction. For
Mm,
things like the kind of freshwater, land change, um, things like pollutants and novel entities, like all of these things that we face that are serious challenges. Um, I've gone off on a tangent, haven't I?
No, 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 no. What I mean is,
all
it's
of these
cool.
all of these things that we face that's like serious challenges, like we need to basically
You feel that they
I've
ne
got
no, 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 no,
yeah,
no,
no, I
no,
forgot what I was
no,
going to
no.
say.
So what you're trying to say?
So we start
Correct
the
me if
whole
I'm wrong. No,
thing.
no, no.
Restart
Correct,
the whole thing.
correct me if I'm wrong. But you're trying to say that you feel the title doesn't give justice to what we feel we need to be doing.
So yeah, let's cut out, that was an unnecessary tangent. We can cut that out, but
No, this guy
basically
is like, I want you guys to see how he thinks.
so basically, like, we created this network. We've got a whole bunch of leading scholars
Yeah.
but also practitioners, who are really embedded within this subject. We've
Mhm.
got practitioners who have been trying to help build community cohesion, trying to help build like adaptation systems and responses, and to champion underrated individuals
Yeah.
for like the longest time. And we have scholars who are trying to basically help ensure that the discourse around climate futures is not this kind of like reductive discourse.
Mm,
When a
mm.
lot of people think about climate security, they think about like Mad Max kind of, like these disaster movies, and there's like generally this one, generally middle-aged white guy who's like, I'm gonna save my family, and like everyone else is
Totally.
gonna die, and then we're okay with that somehow. Like, but it's a lot of this stuff is like it's just way more nuanced and way more complicated,
Complicated. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I could say that most of the kind of narratives that we hear about like food security are just massively reductive, or they're not focusing on things that are important things.
Okay.
You're thinking like crop failures, that's a big issue, but also like, you know, and I hope to get a guy on to talk about this, like the amount of protein that's in some of those crops is like decreasing and decreasing
It's
and decreasing.
increasing. Yeah.
You think about like migration, it's always like a billion people are going to be moving from these areas and they're going to be coming flooding into Europe. And it's like, well, actually, talk to the migration experts. That's not what they're saying. You know,
Yeah.
they're talking about things like, people staying, people moving towards danger, people having like, generally it's like moving shorter distances.
Mm.
And a lot of these narratives are not getting out there. And I
No.
think a lot of these narratives are, it's not even that they're not getting out into the public domain, they're not getting into policy areas.
Mm.
And I think part of that is this classic thing of like, it's harder to get an idea out of someone's head than it is to get an
You know,
idea in.
yeah.
So I think what we're trying to do is to help bring that community together to kind of say, how can we work together jointly? I mean, we're not, you know, the only ones who are trying to do this, but we're trying to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
How can we bring together people in a joint way to try and transmit that? And I mean, that's why I think like for me, bringing in someone like you is just absolutely vital. Because in academia, we're like, yeah, you know what we can really do to change the needle? We'll have a conference. We'll do a conference, and then that'll solve the problem, won't it? And then, or maybe we'll do some like documentary. It's like, well, who watches that documentary, really? People who are already persuaded of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to work with people, and I mean, I'm talking about like people like yourself who can understand media, who can translate things, people who are behavioral scientists, people who are, experts in kind of grand narratives and local community
He
leaders who
does.
can
Yeah.
embed
Yeah.
concepts
Yeah.
into. So I think we need to turn around and say, how do we actually get this message into? And I mean, that's kind of my thing. That's been my thing for a while. It's like, for me, I focus on senior leaders.
Yeah.
So my research, my teaching is basically my job as a teacher is just to spend, 70% of my time reading any single article that could be to do with an environmental trend, its security implications, or what that means for like people who are trying to achieve security,
Mhm.
basically. And I just read and read and read and read so that I can have that generalist knowledge to help inform kind of policy that is more
Yeah.
random. But my research focus is like, how do we educate those senior officials?
Officials.
How do we get them to care? How do we get them to think that the trade-offs are like it's better to act now
Yeah.
versus like, in a year's
Yes,
time
time.
when it's
Yeah.
worse?
Yeah.
Like, and how do we basically turn around and say, like, you don't just understand the problem, you are motivated to achieve a solution.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
haven't found that solution yet.
So,
I'm still trying
so I think
to
but
get
that's I guess the crossover with underrated individuals coming on board is as a as a company, we're focused on empowering marginalized or underutilized
Mm,
talent, and a lot of that talent, they all usually like storytellers, they're musicians, they're artists,
yeah.
they're um, filmmakers. So them understanding these concepts or feeling inclined to write about these concepts makes it more accessible for
Yeah.
a greater audience. So instead of us now empowering, I mean, well, having the conversation with the general directly, is we're able to inspire the general's daughter who lives with him.
Yeah.
As we've had these discussions before,
Yeah.
and she's able to like poke the bear every morning,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, Dad, what
Do
you doing
something.
about it?
Yeah.
Or yeah, Mom, what's
Yeah.
going on? And when you have kids who are, I mean, we have kids ourselves. When they
Should we
want
just say shout out to children of very important people? Do your bit.
call to action
Yeah.
for those of you who are in these spaces, please. tap them on the shoulder and tell them.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's the idea around us bringing these ideas to life. It's also you'll hear this again in a lot of spaces in business and stuff. It's either, as you said yesterday, I think it was, it's either sexy or scary.
Mm.
And I feel that we're able to tell it in a six
That's how you get someone to care
care
about
about
something.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that as creatives and as storytellers, as story holders or whatever we want to call them, um, I feel that underrated individuals from that side of things, they can make something like that very sexy and very attractive and
Mm.
very accessible.
It's about another thing for me, I think, as well, which
Yeah.
is there's this concept that like I think we've talked about, but it's called the Overton window. And
Mm,
it's basically the what is deemed to be like the window of
mm.
what is deemed to be politically acceptable to do.
Okay.
So let's say that you were to have like two really like centrist governments, and one of them was saying we need to like invest, 20 billion in climate, and one of them was saying like we need to invest 15 billion in climate.
Hmm.
You'd be like, right, well, the solution that they're going to go for to please the population is somewhere,
In the middle.
yeah, if or if the population believes that, then the solution they're going to go for is somewhere in the middle. You get someone who's like, way out on the outside of that spectrum, who's like, you know, all humans need to go extinct.
Yeah.
Like that's the solution that we have. You get someone who's way out on the other side of the spectrum, who's like, we need to colonize space. And then we need to make sure the human race lasts forever. Nothing else is important. Let's colonize space. And suddenly, the window of what is deemed to be politically acceptable or politically possible
Mm,
expands, and you
mm,
can make different decisions.
mm,
So I think by featuring, in addition to like, scary, sexy, by featuring a greater diversity of voices, by
mm.
making sure that people in the public, domain, a
Yeah.
bit like society, but also decision makers, have that understanding, that routine, regularized, embedded sense that actually there's a huge array of possibilities out there, then you can make sure that they make decisions that are at least more cognizant of like the left of arc and the right of
Right of
arc.
arc. Yeah, I think it's also that idea that and this is I think my shout out to people that are already subscribed and people that are tuned into the conversation. Um there's been multiple times where certain institutions, and I'm not going to say too much on this podcast
My
because I don't.
institution.
No, 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 no. Like certain institutions that give poorer countries a lot of finance and run projects within those countries,
Yeah.
right? They go in and the experts come to the table feeling like the people that are in that country
No,
have
nothing.
know
Yeah.
nothing. Like and this is my bid to people out there. Like comment down there, like in the comment section, what you think climate security is, and don't think that that's the wrong answer
No,
because
100%.
it, as you say, it helps us understand. Like there's a lot of indigenous knowledge that we're losing because people are not speaking it because they feel and people are approaching them in a way where that knowledge is not valued. It is
Mm,
valued. And I think that's something that I've been trying to do is say, look, guys, we have stuff here. We have a lot to give. We have a lot to share. These people have taken concepts and, you know, put them in good English or whatever you want to call it and presented them as if they're their own.
yeah.
There's things like and I'm not calling people out, but like Kate Raworth's
Donut economics.
donut economics. I read it and I was like, it's great that she put the book together. But again, I read it and I looked at that and I was like, I've seen this with my grandmother and them.
Yeah.
Like understanding the space within that we can play within is something that these people were doing long before
Mm.
she put it in a book.
Don't push your land too hard, otherwise
Otherwise, yeah,
you suffer the
you suffer,
consequences.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then you can't eat next month.
Yeah.
Like we talk about, like crop rotation was not a thing that they invented. It's stuff that I was experiencing and in a very traditional format.
Mm.
We look at what's happened in the Amazon jungle when they've done the research and they've looked at the black soil, terra preta, and it's clear that it's got elements of clay and human, thing. And that's the part of the jungle that's doing better than the other parts of the jungle.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, okay. So food forests are a thing. And then you go to Africa and you look at the soil before fertilizer was introduced in a lot of the spaces, and you see ash. And it's like, oh, there's a thing we do, like especially after dry seasons, is we torch the land. And
Mm.
people are like, don't burn the land. But then you see what the land looks like in 2 months, like 2 months later after the rains come. And that charcoal or that char, because they're not burning the trees down, they're burning the dry grass.
Mm.
That char gives enough for, for plants to grow because it holds
Yeah.
nitrogen longer. So there's a science to it. But because the grandmother isn't explaining or the grandfather isn't explaining the science the way science explains it, oh, it's not a real thing until you go and you look at it and it's like, oh no, it's actually a real thing. And that's the thing is I genuinely feel like underrated ideas is not a bunch of experts and a bunch of creatives alone. It's everybody. Like if you have an idea, drop it in the comments and let's explore it. Let's bring it to life. Let's see what we
Yeah.
can unpack from it because we don't know what that will do in terms of giving hope and perspective and openings for us to evaluate some of the and because we might get somebody who is a policymaker on the podcast and they read your comment and that's the thing is
Assuming they can read.
it's like asking an assistant to read the commentary. But
I think there's a sort of so I mean to take it to because there's going to be a whole bunch of academics who would like shout at me if I didn't say this, but like the term climate security,
Mhm,
it's there's a risk of it resulting in something called securitization.
mhm,
And securitization is basically when you take a subject matter, and it goes from being a kind of a broad social issue, so like non-urgent, and then if certain people talk about it, it becomes a politicized issue.
mhm,
And then it gets a bit more kind of leverage, certain types of actions are done. And then if you make it seem like something that is dangerous, threatening,
mhm.
then you securitize it. And that gives even more power to be able to enact certain types of actions.
Yep. There's
So we
certain
can send the military in
yeah, because
because it's a security risk.
yeah, which is kind of so there's another two podcasts, some of the biggest podcasts in the world that have been pulled for this type of stuff,
Mm,
where it's like Diary of a CEO, medicalizing a lot of the conversation, and
right.
then it becomes extreme. And again,
Yeah.
yeah. So I get what you're saying. But from a security perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, you see it in a lot of like, so historically, the people who were able to do this securitization were those who had access to levers of power anyway.
Yeah.
They still are the people
Yeah.
in general, because fundamentally, if you have the power, you can use your security forces to kind of do that stuff, and you have the platform to be able to securitize something. But that's changing. And if you look at the way that climate has been seen as a security issue by wider society, that's not really down to the military.
Mm,
That's down to like Greta Thunberg. That's down
mm,
to like these
mm,
advocates on the front lines who are, you know, environmental defenders out
mm,
there who are like getting killed, left, right, and center because they're kind of like standing up against corporations and organized criminal gangs and stuff. And what's happening is that there is a movement towards securitizing this, which is actually a bit of everyone,
mhm,
you know, like everyone is kind of increasingly using this language. Now, I think as an academic, you tend to kind of focus in on this thing, and sometimes you can spend, you know, it's a concern. It's a serious concern, and it's something you've got to be careful of because obviously those security responses can be maladaptive responses. They create more problems than they solve. Um, And as an academic, you can often spend a lot of time saying, like, oh, well, there's a risk here, there's a risk there, there's a risk here, there's an opportunity there, there's a risk here. And you kind of think we should be extremely careful about securitizing this issue.
Mm.
The conversation I had with you, where you gave your perception of environmental security, changed the way that I thought about that securitization issue,
Mm.
because fundamentally you verbalized a perspective on environmental security that was, that wouldn't necessarily lead to that kind of securitizing action, that was just as valid as the way that people in the policy space might look at, the concept of climate risks through a security lens. And I think that there's this desire I have, and it goes back to you saying like people put some, put comments in the comments
Yes, comment
section,
section. Yeah, yeah,
comment section. We're a professional already.
yeah. Social media expert now.
um, yeah, like I would like for people to give us their perspective on what environmental security is. Even if, I mean, we'll get way more, we'll get like way more content out there about different visions of, the kind of security implications of what we're facing, the solutions that we might be able to achieve, the way that different trends are shaping different kinds of, capacity and opportunity and motivation for people around the world. But I would like to, also just make sure that we have this kind of consistent gathering of different perspectives on what climate security and what environmental security,
Security.
ecological security, planetary security,
Use
whatever
it.
you want to call it,
Call it. Yeah.
um, what that means to people. Because I think actually one way of creating a genuine pressure to act whilst avoiding typical security responses is to just broaden that concept of what security means to people. And I mean, you get some amazing examples of this, like after like independence in South Africa, the oh God, I always forget her name. Um, the sort of like member of parliament who was running the defense committee.
Mhm.
She was like, our national security infrastructure, a security infrastructure is basically based on apartheid. It is based on oppression.
Yeah.
Is that providing security for the South African people? No. And what she could have done is she could have gone back into Parliament and been like, what do we think it is? But she did this like nationwide survey that
Yeah.
basically said, what is security to you?
Yeah.
And based on the responses they got, they kind of reframed the South African Defense Forces.
Yeah.
Like, so there are examples, there are case studies, there are precedents for turning around and saying, if we get enough people contributing to define what security needs to be to them. And you see this
Yeah.
now in citizens' assemblies, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like citizens' assemblies, it's another one of those ones like that in Africa, like you know what I mean? That was like, or like we had like the measurement
The
system,
the
in the Middle
the
East and
village
stuff.
meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Citizens' assemblies. Now, come on, Jerome. Use the correct language, yeah. But yeah, like these mechanisms are there, but we just need to be kind of consistently doing it, do
Yeah.
everything all the time as much as you can,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing about like the internet and these podcasts and things, it gives us spaces to have these conversations and have the community, like the community or the village meeting can be international now,
Mm.
so we can get ideas and perspectives from places that, that we've never been to. And that's only possible in this era. Like if we go back even 30 years, we wouldn't be able to do this. You wouldn't be able to put your opinion out there. And somebody,
Anyone can
100,000,
access it.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
unless you're certain people. But now here we are, and I think that's my main thing is I go through all the comments. If you send us emails at hello@ui-grp.com, I go through all the emails. If a team member sees something that they think I've missed, they'll let me know and I'll go over it. But I try my best to make sure I'm on top of that because, as you said, everyone's ideas, like in music, we have this saying, there's no such thing as a bad song. It's just a
Mm.
song that needs work. So I believe that entirely. Like there's no bad ideas. There's just a lot of ideas that may need
I
a
don't know,
lot
man.
more
There are some
work.
bad ideas.
But that's it. It's like it's from that bad idea that sometimes, something amazing is born. It's the scientist, it's the scientist who is doing something that is completely unrelated to the world, and then that one product manager walks in and goes, "Oh, look, if you do this, it's this," and they're like, "Oh," But it's like, I
Yeah, I
mean,
know, but
so
I'm
many
thinking about
things.
some of the stuff I've done in life. I'm like, there's no possible way you could interpret that as being an idea that needs work. Like, you're an idiot.
Oh man, so I guess as a first episode, I like where we've come from. I hope people have a good understanding of what we're trying to do with the underrated ideas.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
as I said in the comment section, just drop those questions.
So
Yep.
here's the sorry,
No, no,
man,
no,
I
no, carry on,
interrupted you.
carry on, carry on, no, no, no.
So I should plug the website, shouldn't I?
Oh
I
yeah,
should plug,
you should plug the network, plug the website.
So what we're gonna do, so kind of our we've got our own environmental security research group in King's College London.
Yeah,
But this network, which is environmental-security.org, is basically like an an open access platform where we're going to be putting loads of resource. We've already got a bunch of like games on there that people can play, download for free. We're going to be putting up like things like research shorts that people
yeah,
can like
yeah.
listen to, for free, get an insight into stuff that's being said in the scholarship that they can't get access to because they don't have like a subscription
Subscription,
university account, stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And we're going to be trying to like get a lot of this stuff out there, accessible, democratized. So what you're going to help us produce
yeah.
is going to be featured on that website, is going to be, we're going to be driving that through to policymakers, to practitioners, to, people who are deciding on like our security strategies, our environmental strategies, our energy transition strategies, our resource transition strategies. So what we have is the ability for both of us, I think, to
Mm.
take the content that people are giving us, both in the people we're interviewing and the people that are communicating with
Communicating,
us,
yeah,
and say, let's take that and let's use our access to these different spaces
yep,
to transmit it,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And yeah, I can knock on people's doors and be like, oh my God, I heard this amazing thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You should include it in that government strategy, please.
I mean, and the beautiful thing with underrated individuals as a company is we're constantly helping creatives explore new ideas. So your idea or your concept, you know, you could end up partnering or speaking directly to a creative who is interested in something that you've said, and they working on a piece, and then you could now finally see that piece come to life. Maybe it might be in song, it might be in short film, it might be in a theater piece, but knowing that your words have carried a certain weight and are being appreciated and are impacting the future, I think that's powerful. And as a company, that's what we're trying to do is not just to, empower the creative, but empower the individuals and the audience. Make sure that we're making more informed decisions and having more informed discussions around topics. And it's not this you know conspiracy theory, as he said in the beginning. Um, typo. He's laughing. He's like,
I
yeah.
mean, I've got my own conspiracy theories, you know what I mean? You can't grow up like Arab and not be like, yeah.
I've got a few.
Yeah, yeah. Joe Biden, the first Syrian president of the US, you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty. Go through the Iraqi like WhatsApp thread, and it's like, it's mad. There's some mad stuff. Um,
But yeah, so yeah, just thank you guys for tuning in. And these segments are going to be running all year round. I'm going to be on top of it A game because I do see the need for us to have these conversations. So please hold me accountable, hold us accountable as underrated individuals, and big thanks to Dr. Duraid Jalili.
It's
Um,
weird to be called doctor.
yeah, I mean, because it's me. I'm sure he's got
You
a lot
never
of
call me
students.
this. Yeah, yeah. Hey, you.
Iwe.
Iwe.
So, so yeah, it's a big, but honestly, from like, yeah, it's a big thank you to yourself, and the
Thank you, man.
network for gifting us, this opportunity and connecting because it's very easy for either party to just go, oh, well, I'm doing what I'm doing and I can carry on working in my silo.
I think thank you for taking like academics under your wing and being like, let's show you how to actually communicate with people. Like, look, open the door. There's a world outside.
And to the world, we've opened the door. Hit us up, subscribe, stay blessed, and we'll see you guys on the flip. Peace.